Welcome to the Dairy News and Views podcast, a production of the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Dairy Team. Our podcast covers current educational, research, and industry tools available for your operation to manage healthy cows and calves while producing the highest quality dairy products. Thanks for joining us today on Dairy News and Views from the ISU Dairy Team. I'm Jen Bentley, Northeast Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, and today I'm here with my Extension Dairy Team colleagues, Gail Carpenter, State Extension Dairy Specialist, Dr. Phil Jardin, our Extension Dairy Veterinarian, and Fred Hall, Northwest Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, as we discuss today's topic with our guest, recapping the Dairy Industry Doubleheader weekend. So welcome back to the podcast, team.
Thank you.
Always great to be here.
Just wish we could have changed the game a little bit.
Right? Everything else went smoothly except that score.
Better than the next game, but
yeah, let's don't talk about that today.
Yeah.
Some of us are still recovering.
Yeah, so today we're joined with ISU colleagues Allison Vander Plaats and Grant Dewell, and we want to thank them for joining us on our podcast. And while we're getting you started here, Dr. Vander Plaats and Dr. Dewell, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your roles with Iowa State University?
Sure. So I'm Allison Vander Plaats. I'm a postdoctoral associate with Vet Field Services through the College of Veterinary Medicine. I'm working on a graduate degree, and I'm happy to be here today.
And this is Grant Dewell. I'm Dr. Jardin's counterpart and in the Extension Veterinarian program. I've been the beef extension veterinarian at Iowa State University for about 16 years.
So a lot of good resources, and I know Dr. Vander Plaats and Dewell, you both kind of kicked off our industry weekend by having more of a industry consultant meeting on Friday. And so Gail and Phil, you were kind of the spearheads of that, organizing that event. So kind of explain what your goals were for the weekend and how we partnered with our dairy industry.
Well, we partnered this with the IVMA, the Iowa Vet Med Association. They let us hold the event in their office, which is a very nice space there in Ankeny. Our purpose was to kind of bring together both veterinarians and nutritionists, other consultants and dairymen into one spot and discuss some current topics that are in the industry. So the two we picked for this one were automatic calf feeders, which Dr. Vander Plaats talked about. And then, of course, it's hard to avoid the elephant in the room, the high-path avian influenza, which Dr. Vander Plaats talked about. And then Dr. Dewell showed us the trailer, which he'll talk about here in a second, the biosecurity trailer, which is a very nice educational tool for demonstrating the fundamentals of what a good biosecurity program should look like. It was very well received. They did a very good job talking about things there.
After that, we had Friday Night Social, which was sponsored by Elanco. And then Saturday, we invited the dairy industry to come join us in Ames and had a great time talking to people about what we do as Iowa State Extension. We had a resource table that some of our other teams contributed to here on campus. And we partnered with the Dairy Science Club as well for their alumni reunion. So it was kind of an excuse to put our face out there and see people and talk to people and also enjoy some Iowa State football.
I should point out here that we got credit for veterinarians through the Iowa Board of Veterinary Medicine, 3 hours of CE for the event Friday afternoon, and then also 3 hours of ARPAS credit for nutritionists could get 3 hours to keep up their certification with ARPAS. So we appreciate the help from both of those organizations.
And I should point out that in addition to the Dairy Science Club, the Iowa State Dairy Association was a huge help in getting food for the tailgate as well. They sponsored the food, and then Dairy Science Club helped it arrive. So thanks to both of those organizations.
So going back to the Friday session, Dr. Vander Plaats, we kind of started with the automatic calf feeder discussion, and we know that automatic calf feeders have been in the industry now for a number of years, but it always seems like we're learning something new, best management practices, and you had some experiences to share, and you want to talk a little bit about some of what you shared with the audience there that day?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, Jen, we've had auto feeders for a long time now, but we still really don't have concrete resources from which to pull. So I did some deep dive kind of background research and combined that with our experience with our own calf feeders at the dairy. And some takeaways that we've learned is the manufacturer recommendations are not necessarily what is going to work for each individual's farm. So we are putting calves on about 1 week of age. And since we have a mixed herd of Holsteins and Jerseys, we do see more problems with our Jersey calves, simply because we have quite a size difference there. And then there's just a temperament difference between those two breeds. So we have had a little bit more supportive care required for our Jersey calves, since they are co-housed with our Holstein calves. We've also seen some machine issues as well. So just like anything, we would love for our auto feeders to truly be automatic and self-sufficient. But what we have learned is that they need pretty constant attention and regular maintenance as well. So that includes changing nipples every day. That includes making sure that our lines stay clean and are changed on a regular basis, and that our calves are actually visiting the way that we think that they should. So perhaps one of the coolest things about the auto feeders is we can personalize each calf's individual diet, and we can actually track how often she visits and how much she eats and how quickly she drinks. But we can't just, like I said, assume that everything is taken care of. We need to look back at that data and see, are our calves behaving in a way that we expect, or are there some that maybe need a little bit of an extra push? So I think our takeaways really are auto feeders can be an amazing tool, and they can potentially minimize some of our labor, but I don't think that they completely eliminate all the time that we spend in that calf barn. It just kind of changes.
Dr. Vander Plaats, you talked about at the meeting getting the concentration of milk rate. Do you have any tips on that and how it's different, how we look at that differently in an automatic feeder versus a traditional milk feeding system?
Depending on the system that you choose, the machine should theoretically be mixing at a consistent amount of powder to volume of water, but we still recommend checking our total solids on a weekly basis to ensure that the machine, again, is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. Since most of these machines are purely for use with milk replacer, we can still use a Brix refractometer to determine our total solids, but our actual percentages are going to change a little bit based on which milk replacer product we actually use. So we have to do a little bit more math to determine whether our machine is doing exactly what we think it's doing. So it's kind of like mixing regular milk replacer powder with regular water, just some of it's done for you.
But I know some of the milk replacer labels say to mix at a pretty warm temperature, right? 120 or something.
Yeah, that's a good point, Phil. So a lot of our commercially available replacers have quite high mixing temperatures, somewhere around 110 to 120, whereas most of these machines are using water that's somewhere closer to 105 degrees. So we do want to make sure that when we're choosing a milk replacer for use in these machines, that we're choosing one that is compatible with the machine that we've chosen.
So I have a question. So just talking to people in the industry, it seems like one complaint about these automatic calf feeders is the high rate of pneumonia. Why would that be higher in that kind of a system than in a regular system, or is it higher?
I think it depends on the farm. It's really hard to say. If you compare to calf hutches where each calf is housed and fed individually, there's a lot less direct contact with other calves, especially if you have a more spread out calving interval. So you have quite a range of ages of calves. In these group house systems, we already see a little bit more of these diseases of groups simply because we're mixing different calves. And we may have an age spread up to 2 to 3 weeks difference from our oldest calf to our youngest calf. So I don't think that it's necessarily any worse than other group house systems, but we do need to keep in mind that all of these calves, if we have one group on one auto feeder, that's 20-ish calves per feeder. So all 20 calves are using the same nipple. So if one of them has respiratory disease, everyone else can pick it up pretty easily. Another thought or another consideration, if you're considering putting one of these auto feeders in your barn, is your current barn design. So if there is a way to separate groups by age and still fill pens, while minimizing our age differences from youngest to oldest, that would be preferable.
Allison, one of the things that you talked about was the height of these nipples, and you'd mentioned you had a front leg scale that you kind of used to get the right height. Kind of go over that again. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Sure. So our system has a half scale, basically. So the calf steps up with her 2 front feet and reaches the nipple by standing on this little scale in front, and then her 2 hind feet are still on the ground behind her. And that half scale allows us, in some way at least, to track calf weight. It's not completely science-backed, but it can at least give us an idea of our calves, the weight and the size that we expect them to be. But the other thing it does is really just boost her up to the nipple, so she's able to actually reach it, which honestly is one of our challenges with those Jersey calves, since they are just smaller. Even with that step up onto the scale, they aren't necessarily able to reach that nipple easily.
Yeah, I think we had some good discussion that day around just, going back to the basics of our calf management program, looking at colostrum, looking at housing, ventilation, making sure we're getting adequate nutrition in those calves, because we know that, automatic calf feeders are a little bit more challenging to maybe raise calves, but they can be very successful too. And I know we also had some talking points about grouping calves, how many calves we put in a group. So there's some debate about that, and it probably goes down to management as well, how we can manage those calves within that pen. So very good points there. Thanks for presenting that information to our group there. And the other topic that you addressed that day was high path. And while we haven't had a lot of recent cases here in Iowa, it continues to be a challenge in some of our other states, particularly in California at the time we were having the meeting. So Dr. Jardin, you kind of want to lead this discussion on where high path is now and what your group is seeing there?
Yeah, so Dr. Vander Plaats, you mentioned there that day. I had not realized it, but you said that Utah now had it. So I know that just a few months ago, it looked like Idaho is the only state that had just a few cases left in it. What do you think happened there? Why did we end up with an issue in California and Utah now?
Well, California was spread theoretically from a group of cattle coming from Idaho that were eventually sent back to Idaho. Whereas Utah actually was discovered because there was a poultry flock that tested positive within Cache County. And so they set up a surveillance area and confirmed 8 dairies within that surveillance area had also tested positive. There still is not a lot of information available about those Utah dairies, whether those dairies are seeing clinical signs in those cows or if they're just testing positive at this point. So I'm not sure kind of where we are in that disease process, but California has continued to gain 5 to 10 dairies per day confirmed with new high path cases. So it's definitely something that is continuing to spread throughout that state. And some people are theorizing that as we get into our normal human flu season, that we're potentially going to see a resurgence there as well. It is important to note that still every single dairy case has been traced back to a single genotype. There was recently a pig case that was reported in Oregon that made everyone a little itchy, like, oh no, has it species jumped again? And that's actually a different genotype. So it's not related to our one spillover event that has infected all of our dairy cattle. but is potentially related to, or is related to, H5N1 in general.
Okay, so I've heard some dairymen concerned about the quality of the test. Is this a pretty good test for, we have good tests for avian influenza?
Yeah, I mean, we have two different tests. We have the PCR, which is literally looking for pieces of virus, and then we have an ELISA, which is looking for influenza virus specific antibodies. So both of those tests are very sensitive and very specific. So we can say pretty much if you're positive on one of those tests, you have at least been exposed to the virus.
Okay. And I know that the rules are changing and the surveillance is changing now, but Colorado had a plan to test every herd, and it sounds like the USDA is going more toward that direction. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it sure sounds that way. So Colorado was really our only state to take such a aggressive move and start doing weekly bulk testing on all of their Colorado dairies. And while it was really met with resistance at first, from the people that I've talked to, both veterinarians and producers, both feel that in the end it helped to contain the spread of that disease and actually get everyone kind of on the same page and under control quicker than it would have otherwise. So now with kind of our ongoing discovery in California and Utah and Idaho, where it's kind of hanging out, USDA sounds like they're moving towards more regular, potentially mandatory bulk tank testing. That has not been confirmed at this point, but they did put out a press release maybe a week and a half ago now saying that we use that for brucellosis eradication and maybe it could be useful for this situation.
Dr. Jordan, one of the other things we talked a little bit about was the announcement that we've had a change in how dairymen are going to be using aspirin. So tell us a little about that.
Yeah, the FDA has made a clarification. I can't say that it's a new rule, but it's a kind of a clarification or a step up on the enforcement of a law that you cannot use things that are not approved in any animal for even off label. And there were quite a few producers using aspirin. Generally, the industry is considered to be fairly innocuous, but the FDA has made a ruling that we can no longer use it in food producing animals. So if someone gets an avian influenza outbreak and they'd like to treat with aspirin to get the fever down, they cannot do that. They'll have to use other things. I suggest they talk to their veterinarian to find out what they should use, if anything.
And there are a good selection of other things that can be used. I mean, it's not as though there's no other chemistry out there.
That's correct. And to be honest, there's not a lot of proof that it actually was doing that much, that aspirin was doing that much to help us. But yeah, there's some pushback on that. There's some producers that are not happy that can no longer use it, but it's probably not going to be the end of the world. There are other solutions. Yeah.
And Fred, you have a webinar coming up on that topic, right? To kind of help producers understand more about that change.
Yes, Allison is going to talk about that clarification as well as how we use label restrictions. And
yeah, she's going to cover the whole antibiotic rule thing, the extra label use.
Extra label, that was it.
Yeah, all those things. Yep.
Dr. Dewell, one of the coolest things we had on Friday was the trailer. Tell us a little bit about how that trailer came to be.
So we had an opportunity about 3 years ago with some money that we got because of the COVID pandemic to do something in the extension vet group, which consisted of our poultry veterinarian, Dr. Yuko Sato, and our swine veterinarian, Dr. Christopher Rodemaker. That was before Dr. Jordan joined our group. At that time, HPAI was a big concern for the poultry world, and African swine fever was a big potential risk for the swine group. So we decided that we'd use that money to get this demonstration trailer as a way to provide some education on how to implement some biosecurity procedures. And so that started again like about in 2021. Took us about a year and a half to get that purchased and remodeled. And then so it's been available now for about a year that we've been using it.
So tell the audience what we did that day. I think you had some of that glow germ powder with the boots.
Yep. Yeah. And so the advantage, the educational opportunity with this trailer is we can set it up in different ways, whether we use a boot bath, whether we use, just a simple, putting on some sort of a boot covering like a plastic boot or rubber boot, or we can use the Dutch entry system, which is a bench system where you have to physically sit down and take your outer clothing and boots off and then swing your feet over the chair, which prevents that cross-contamination issue that biosecurity programs struggle with. And so, that's one of the highlights of the trailer is we can demonstrate how that Dutch entry system works. And so with the demonstration we did, we had this glow germ, which is a powder that you can set down, and then it kind of, you can, when you put on the black light, it fluoresces, and so you can see where that's been tracked through the trailer. And so our initial step was to just have people walk into the trailer after stepping in some of that glow germ powder, sit down in the trailer, put on a pair of plastic boots, and then walk out the back of the trailer. And you could see after a couple of them had did that we wasn't excessive, but you could definitely see that powder had been spread. You could see a couple footprints going down the trailer. We then did a quick demonstration of what happens if you don't do anything, and Dr. Carpenter spread the glow germ from one end of the trailer to the other by just by not doing anything. And so it just shows how even plastic boots or rubber boots help some, or helps a lot. Anything helps a lot. But as the risk goes up, there's more reason to change that. And so then we did the Dutch entry system, and basically all that we could stop all that spread of that powder from going past that bench. So it's a good demonstration of to let people see what's really happening, how that potential spread can occur.
Yeah, glow germ makes everything fun.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat. You had the TV screen out in front of the trailer so that, once you closed the doors and it was dark, you could see what was going on inside the trailer. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought it gave a lot of discussion with the group, just really caused us to reflect on how we do biosecurity on farms and what we might want to change to reduce some of that risk.
Yeah, and there's not in a lot of our more extensive livestock operations, like dairy operations and particularly beef operations, where we're not as integrated as a swine or poultry operation. We sometimes hard to say that, well, we need to do everything, but such as a shower in, shower out facility and those types of things, we've got so much activity sometimes going on between the different parts. In a swine operation, all the animals are inside, and all we have to do is stop everything from getting in. In a dairy, we still have the parlor, and we've got cows moving in and out of the parlor and various things. And so we can't stop everything, but taking a good look at, well, what can we stop, and can we do that practically and economically to try to prevent a spread of something like HPAI is worth going through the exercise.
Dr. Dewell, this is available. Who can use this trailer? I mean, we put it on wheels for a reason.
Yep, it's basically, available about anywhere. Generally, extension is our main conduit, but there are some, we could have some other options for getting that out there for some non-extension events, just because it's an ISU owned trailer, in an ISU vehicle moving it around, and so we have some limitations on how we can get it out there. But once we get it out there, we can we could potentially let anyone use it. It's just a matter of if we wanted to take it to some sort of a program in northeast corner of the state for some organization to use. We could, as long as we could figure out a way to get that up there. But so it's really available to everybody, and that's what we want it to be. It's just a matter of the logistics of, can we get it there in a reasonable fashion. But that's something we can work through. The Iowa Pork Industry Center manages the trailer itself, as far as keeping a calendar to know who's going to be using it when, and making sure that the supplies are stocked and those types of things. There are some rental fees associated with it, just because we've got to pay for upkeep and insurance on the trailer and those types of things. But we want to make sure that it's keeps in good shape, but we still want to get it out there where it can be used.
Well, sounds good. Thanks, Dr. Dewell, for sharing that with us. And yeah, you might see it out in some of our other extension dairy meetings as we move forward. So I think it was a good introduction of what we can do with that. So I appreciate you doing that.
You bet.
So as we kind of conclude here, do we want to move into any discussion about the rest of the weekend? We had the Friday night social. I know a lot of us attended the chuck wagon breakfast, the animal science chuck wagon breakfast in the morning. That was kind of fun to attend and, get to see colleagues from ISU and the animal science department. And then we had the tailgate on Saturday. So any last comments on the rest of the weekend?
I just want to thank everybody for coming to tailgate. We had a good crowd, and we had good weather. The rain didn't start till the middle of the game, so that was very nice. It was a good day. To appreciate all the students and the alumni and dairymen that stopped by. We had a good crowd.
And good food too. Delicious omelets and some good tailgate food.
Fred and I both brought milk, and it was good to see that almost all the milk was used up.
Yes.
I think we went through 3 or 4 gallons of milk. So I think there's some people were thinking it's a tailgate. People are going to drink beer, but I can tell you there was plenty of milk to drink.
And AMPI provided some cheese slices. That was really good too.
That was good. Even the really spicy ones. Maybe a little too spicy for my taste, but pretty good.
I thought it was perfect.
Yep. Thank Mark for bringing those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's probably going to be on our docket for next year to consider a tailgate, and I think continue to work with that relationship with the Dairy Science Club. I know there's a lot of family members that were in town because the Dairy Science kids were hosting it, and alumni were back in town because it was homecoming. So I think it was just a good mix of people, and look forward to the connections that we made.
I really think that we need to schedule this for the first game next year. I believe that'll be over in Dublin. Let's tailgate in Dublin.
A good idea.
Sign me up, Fred. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us on our podcast here today, and we look forward to visiting with you on the next Dairy News and Views from ISU. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or combination inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.